Hi friends, my name's Trish Roberts and you're watching The Naked Empire, and I have tonight with me Eunice Wong, and I'll just read a little bit about Eunice. Eunice Wong is a multi-award winning actor, writer, director and editor and teacher. Her most recent book is What the Health, the official companion book to the documentary of the same name. She also wrote The Sustainability Secret, the official companion book to the documentary Cowspiracy. She was a speaker at the 2017 Asheville Vegan Fest in North Carolina. She is chief editor of the Countering Violence Against Women series on truthdig.com, as well as the editor of Truthdig Book Review, which under her direction has won 2 National Entertainment Journalism Awards, Los Angeles Press Club for Online Critic, and a Maggie Award for Best Regularly Featured Web Column. She has written for Truthdig's Arts and Culture section, the Truthdig Book Review, and the Philadelphia Inquirer Book Review. As an actor, Eunice trained at the Juilliard School and has appeared nationwide and internationally in professional theaters. Eunice's most recent role was Lavinia Mannon's in New York's critically acclaimed revival of Eugene O'Neill's Morning Becomes Electra last spring. So Eunice is a recipient of a Helen Hayes Award, lead actress, a My Theatre Boston Award, Best Actress, a Barrymore nomination, lead actress, and an IRNE nomination, Best Ensemble, as well as being a member of the Actors Equity Association and SAG-AFTRA. As a teacher, Eunice has taught English and poetry at New Jersey State Prison, a men's supermax facility in Trenton, New Jersey, as well as yoga at Princeton's Yoga Stream Studio, where Eunice first learned about the primary precept of yoga, ahimsa, do no harm to the planet, to the sentient beings around us, and to ourselves. So that's a really, and that's the shorter version of this bio. Eunice has done acted in many productions around the United States, and she's so happy to have her with us. So I'll just bring Eunice on now. And hi, Eunice.
Hi, Trish. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. So Eunice and I were just going to talk about a little bit about veganism and how Eunice became vegan and how she brought her family along with her. And also toward the end, we'll talk a little bit about her time sort of teaching, I think it was literature in the men's Supermax facility in Trenton, New Jersey, which that's a really wonderful thing. So Eunice, so if you wouldn't mind just telling us how you became vegan and a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So I was doing my yoga teacher training about 3 years ago. So I've only been vegan for coming up on 3 years, which to me feels like an absurdly short amount of time because I feel like I've been vegan forever, but I really haven't. So 3 years ago, I did my yoga teacher training, and it was at this fantastic studio, Yoga Stream in Princeton, where I teach. And the owner of the studio, Laura Hyman, has been vegan, I think, for, I don't remember how many years, like 15 years. And she, as well as teaching us anatomy and, stuff to be aware of in terms of injuries and stuff, did a unit on ahimsa, which is the very first principle of yoga. And there are traditional yogis who believe that those poses, the asanas, that's not true yoga, that unless you practice ahimsa, which roughly translated is nonviolence, then you're not truly practicing yoga. And Laura talked to us about the animals who are bred in factory farms. She showed us a couple of videos, nothing graphic. She showed us one very short film that had no violence in it whatsoever. It was 2 cows in one of those chutes in a slaughterhouse, and then a door.
Right.
And you could hear sounds coming from behind the door, and then you would see the reactions of these 2 cows. And then one of the 2 cows was also prodded behind the door, and then the door closed. And you heard the screaming, and you saw this one cow who was left trying to turn around in the chute, but it was so narrow that she actually got wedged and she couldn't turn around. And the look on her face was appalling.
Mm.
And that was it. That was the whole video. There was nothing gory. There was nothing graphic.
Right.
And
Oh, wow,
she,
that makes me feel sick.
I know,
It's an
I know.
awful. Mm.
Yeah. And I thought about it for a long time. And the next week we were doing a practice. And I don't know if you're familiar with yoga, but for me, there's something about the physical movement that opens up all kinds of emotional responses. And
Mm.
at the end in Shavasana, when you're lying on your back in the final resting pose, corpse pose, Laura was talking about speaking up for people and animals. Well, she said beings who don't have a
Mm.
voice. And at the time I was also teaching at the prison.
Yes.
And so these images came into my head, both of my students who don't have a voice, who are locked away, and of
Mm.
course these animals that the videos we had been seeing. And I was so overwhelmed emotionally. And I don't know what happened. I started sobbing on my mat.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like that was the major emotional turning point for me. And then
Mm.
shortly after that, I saw Cowspiracy,
Mm.
the documentary about the impact of the animal agriculture industry on the environment. And I was appalled because I had always considered myself an environmentalist. You know, I did all the things that people tell you should do. I recycled, I, changed the light bulbs to compact fluorescence. At the time, they weren't telling us about LEDs. I composted. I had cloth diapered both my children. So I
Mm.
did all these
Mm.
things, and I had no idea of any of the statistics in this movie.
Mm.
And I just felt that having this knowledge, I couldn't any longer live with the hypocrisy of saying that I
Mm.
cared about the environment or that I cared what kind of a planet my children lived on and still continue to eat animal products. And
Mm.
so the environment for me was sort of the rocket booster into veganism. But once I made the decision, I started learning, of course, about the horrific animal welfare, the torture, the exploitation, the, slavery of cows and dairy farms and hens and laying conditions. And then, of course, I did a lot of research on the health implications of eating animal products for this recent book. So the
Mm.
more I learn, the more it all weaves together. But the
Mm.
initial decision for me was environmental.
Yeah, that's really powerful actually, like just hearing that about the cows in the chute. There's another one, I think it was made by a French producer where it just shows a sheep going down the chute, and it doesn't have any blood or anything, but you can just see the distress and the fear, and they know what's coming.
Of
And
course.
it's just a sort of a um, you know it's just awful. And like, just hearing you describe that and thinking that that's what's happening every second of every day, these sentient animals, going down these chutes, and they know what's coming and they can feel it in the
Right.
air.
Right. And they
And
know that the animals feel fear, which is why they design these
yes,
slaughterhouses the way they do in these curves so that they can't see ahead of them. And so
yes,
they're trying to preempt this fear that they know
yes,
the animals are suffering. So there's an
yes,
acknowledgement of that. They're not just machines.
yes, that's
And
right.
even with these blinders, they're aware, they can hear the sounds, they can probably smell
Yes,
something in the air that we can't smell, and
yes,
related to the chemical pheromones or whatever it is that
yeah.
animals emit when they're frightened.
Yes, yes. And they can hear everything, and they can, yeah, they can smell it, and it's just the actual killing floor itself is just appalling, and stunning often doesn't work, and animals are boiled
Yeah,
alive, like millions of pigs are boiled alive every year, and
right.
chickens are boiled. It's just an appalling horror house. Anybody who thinks that there's
Yeah,
such a thing as a humane slaughter, I mean, humane killing, the whole thing is an oxymoron. It's ridiculous, and
right.
it's just sort of something that and it's all hidden, and it's intentionally hidden. It's
Intentionally, of
out there
course.
somewhere so that we don't have to think about who's on our plates and who we're wearing on our back. I mean, I read an amazing thing where a lot of cows, because they're they're not stunned properly because of the fast production lines. They actually are at the hide ripping machine alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you, it's just, and this is what, when we're not vegan, we're participating in this every day. That's something that, we need to think about, that these little packets of neatly bloodless packets on the
Clean,
shelves,
sterile.
and the milk containers that all look very nice and white. They've actually, often they've had titanium oxide, I think, added to them to make them all sort of beautiful and white. But all these products represent cheese and everything. They all represent terrible torture and
Yeah.
death, basically. Even people don't even think that milk products and cheese and all of this, they think that that's quite harmless, or eggs are harmless, but there's in fact more harm in dairy than there is if one was just eating flesh
Yeah.
alone, sort of thing.
Much
So
more
these are,
suffering.
yeah, and so this is why, it's so important for us as vegans to try and when people sort of suggest, oh well, I'll just go vegetarian, or I'll cut back, or I'll whatever, that if we really reject violence and injustice, then we have to reject it all, and that means all animal products to the best of our ability. So
Right.
yeah, so I mean,
Well,
that must have been.
the thing about
Mm,
dairy that for me was I emotionally couldn't couldn't handle it in a way, was that I had breastfed both my children for
mm,
2.5 years each, and I loved it. I had done
mm.
all this research while I was pregnant about childbirth and labor and pregnancy, and I forgot to research breastfeeding. So when they came out, it was a total surprise, but it was magical. I mean, my son, he just latched on, and it really does elicit these chemical reactions in the mother and in the child. And they've done
Mm,
studies on this, and the bond that you feel with a breastfeeding infant is so intense and so unlike anything I've ever felt before.
mm,
And to think of, a mother cow giving
mm,
birth to her calf and
mm,
wanting to have that bond. And even dairy farmers will
mm,
say that the sound, the crying and
mm,
bellowing that a mother cow
mm,
makes when her baby is taken away from her so that the farmer can take the mother's milk to sell it is one
mm.
of the most horrible things you can hear. And
Yes.
just to think, if someone were to take my child away, my baby away, while
Mm,
I was breastfeeding them,
mm.
is, I mean, I could start to cry right now thinking about it.
Yes.
And we have these human ethics where you are not supposed to do to another human what you would
Mm,
not want done to yourself.
mm, mm,
And yet our society is inundated with these horrible things that we do to
mm,
these
mm,
animals. And as the dairy farmers will say, these mother cows suffer. They pace in the area where they last saw their calf. They won't leave it. They won't
mm,
eat.
mm, mm,
Other cows will come and they appear to be comforting her. I mean, it's
mm,
very clear that they're
mm.
suffering. And it
Yeah, and
happens
there's
over and over again in their lives. Their
that's
babies
right,
are
and
taken away and their milk is stolen.
that's right, and there's a particular sound too that mothers make when and when they're actually taken from the mothers. It's really distressing. I mean, I've seen videos of where, it's absolutely horrific watching a mother being separated from a calf, and many people may not realize that male calves are of no use to the dairy industry, so they're removed from the mother calf, and the mother, and then they're taken to a slaughterhouse at a day or so old, and then of course they're put on trucks for 24 hours without any sort of nutrition, and they're in the cold or the blazing heat, and then they get out, and then they're often sucking on the slaughterhouse person's finger as
Yeah.
they're being taken across the slaughterhouse floor. I mean, this is the sort of appalling stuff, the violence that is happening every second of every day, and to 1 trillion land and aquatic animals um, all over the world. That's how many we torture and kill every year for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure, because
Mhm.
as you know, Eunice, we don't need animal products at all to survive. We can easily meet all our nutritional requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we have for all this terrible violence and injustice, the only reason we have is because it tastes good. I
Yeah,
mean,
and actually, I think the bigger reason is convenience, because you and I
yes.
both know that
Mm,
vegan food is delicious, and
mm,
your taste buds take roughly 3 to 4 weeks to change.
mm,
So if you were to adopt a vegan diet, it might taste very strange at first, but if you were to stick with it just for a couple of weeks, the
mm,
taste buds do change, they regenerate, and
mm,
then other things begin to taste delicious. I mean, I had never really tasted a grapefruit until 2 months after I became vegan. I mean, it was
mm,
like, it just used to taste sour before. I wasn't crazy about them. And then
mm,
one day I tasted a grapefruit after I became vegan, and it was so rich, so complex, the taste.
mm,
And so
mm,
I don't really think it's about palate pleasure, because there's
mm,
just as much palate pleasure to be gotten from
mm,
vegan food. It's really about convenience, because our world, our societies are set up in such a way that you can grab a burger here, you can get a roast chicken here. You don't
yes.
have to think
Mm,
about it. They're available everywhere. You go to the grocery store, everything is filled with animal products. Whereas
mm,
if you want to eat consciously,
mm,
then you might have to think a little bit about where you're going to get um, these vegan products that aren't maybe carried in your local grocery store. So
mm,
it's really convenience. It's not,
mm,
I don't think it's about palate pleasure
yes.
or anything like that. You know, it's about
Mm,
the way society is set up and how
mm,
difficult it is for vegans to eat the way we want to. And
mm,
more, it's becoming less difficult, which
yes,
is
yes.
which is wonderful. It's becoming more and more mainstream. You're
Mm, mm,
finding soy milks, almond milks in mainstream grocery stores, tofu,
mm,
tempeh,
mm.
and you would
And
never have
vegan
seen that.
cheeses. Yes, there's
Exactly,
vegan
vegan
cheeses, and
cheeses.
you can
Yeah,
even make your own. There's just so many options now, and the cuisines are incredible. Like, there's all sorts of different cuisines, and I've never eaten better in my life. And it's just, and I mean, there's gazillions of recipes online
yeah.
too.
There
Um,
are. People
More and
ask me
more.
the best source for vegan recipes, and I just say the internet. Just put vegan, type in vegan, and then whatever it is you want to make. Or you could type
Mm,
best vegan, whatever it is you want to
yes,
make.
yes, yes.
And then you come up with 5 different recipes, and you can
Yeah.
choose whichever one looks the most doable to you. Like, I'm not
Mm.
a I'm not a cook by any means. I didn't know what a leek was 3 years ago. Um, so I'll look for the simplest recipes possible, and they've all been amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I know it is. It's amazing because I never really I wasn't it was I was an okay cook, and then after a little while I actually can make really great Indian curries now, and that I never really sort of bothered too much about. Just so many different things now I can make, and really really yummy. And in fact, sometimes we go to some places, and I say I think, and we both agree that mine are probably better, but I don't know. But
Right.
anyway, yeah, it's very very it's much easier than say even it was like when I became vegan in 2005. So many products, even if you want to buy stuff that's pre-made, there's products. I'm not really that into that buying pre-made products, but and it's also the myth is that it's expensive to be vegan. It's expensive, but it's not. I mean, there are lots of countries that used to just have legumes and grains and all of that,
Right.
and that was sort of poorer people would eat that. And in fact, it's actually quite simple and fairly cheap,
Yeah. Well,
to
what's
eat vegan.
expensive are the highly processed um,
Yes.
vegan alternatives to stuff
Mm,
like meat and cheese, and it's all stuff
mm,
you can live without. Um,
sure.
so fruits and vegetables, and like you said, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds.
Mm, mm, yeah.
That's all you
And
really need.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I've never eaten better, so I mean, it's really great. And so I was just going to ask you, how'd your family, how did they come along with you? So did you introduce that to them, or,
I
I
did.
mean,
Yeah, my family was incredible. My husband Chris came with me to see Cowspiracy, and he was completely convinced by the documentary.
mm,
And then I was a little worried about our children, who were 3 and 6 at the time. And
mm,
I just instinctively thought, their favorite foods were what were they? It was mac and cheese and sausage pizza and hard-boiled eggs and yogurt, fish sticks. And I thought, what are they going to eat?
Yeah.
And it was funny. My 6-year-old actually got it pretty quickly. And my 3-year-old was resistant at first. And there's this great story. I call it the dumpling story. This was after I had decided I wanted to become vegan, and I was sort of trying to move my kids that way. And we were getting Chinese takeout, and it was sort of my first foray into Chinese takeout while vegan. And so my daughter wanted pork dumplings, which was her favorite. And I suggested vegetable dumplings, and she was not having it. And I thought, it's so instinctive for kids to be empathetic to animals. They watch these cartoon animals, they have their stuffed animals, they love seeing dogs and cats and any animal really. And I took a risk, and I told her, honey, there's a reason I don't want you to eat pork dumplings anymore. And it's because they're made with dead pigs. And I kept it really neutral, really, non-graphic. I just sort of stated it. And she thought about it for a long time. And then after a very long pause, she said, I'll try the vegetable dumplings. And she loved them. So that was really easy. But for my kids, it was really about the animals. It was all about the compassion. Because they instinctively get that you don't kill or hurt animals if you don't need to. And we've been teaching them all their lives, and I hope most parents are teaching their kids, that you don't hurt and kill other living beings if you don't need to. I mean, it's in line with these precepts that we live with. It's just that at a certain point, adults kind of shunt the animals aside, and then you become sort of like a soft-headed individual if you care about the animals. It's a very bizarre shift that happens. And I remember when my son, who before we became vegan, he was maybe 3, and he was starting to realize that the stuff we were giving him called chicken might actually be a chicken. And he asked me about it. And I remember that moment. We weren't vegan. And I was doing all these contortions in my head trying to justify it to him, saying it is chicken and everyone eats it and it's okay. And the only reason I could give him was that we needed to eat it to be healthy. So don't worry about the fact that it was a live bird. Just eat it.
Oh, yeah, right. And isn't it funny, because isn't that amazing that actually, on one hand, we're saying to children, and reading lovely little stories about happy farms and all of this. And then we're saying, but just eat that. And you know what I mean?
It's very disconnected. This sort of, schizoid compartmentalization. And then after a certain point, that becomes natural to the children, where they can compartmentalize violence and killing things and eating them and still believe that they're being kind and loving, and I think that compartmentalization as they grow older comes to encompass everything, so that the way you compartmentalize a chicken or a cow becomes a way that you can compartmentalize a woman or an African American or Palestinians or prisoners or anything. You just put them in a little box and you sort of make up these rationalizations and you say, well, that's how it is. Put it aside, close the box.
That is so great, Eunice. That's exactly what I talk about when I talk about veganism, because, this otherization, it never just stops at non-human animals. It's Palestinians, it's women, it's, the LGBTIQ community.
Absolutely.
It branches, and it's all discriminations are related, speciesism, racism, sexism, heterosexism, the whole thing. It's all related, and it all causes violence. And so, and we sort of, for some reason, we're so indoctrinated when we come on, are born, that we just don't even see animals for the sentient beings they are.
Right. Well, it's interesting because when you look at language, the language that we use to otherize people, it's so often animals. Women are chicks. They're either chicks or they're cows or they're dogs, depending on how you feel about them. Cops are pigs. If someone is acting in a really wild, uncontrolled manner, they're an animal. If people are being conformist and not thinking, they're sheep. So we use
Yes,
these labels, these
yes,
animal labels, and we stick them on people to push them away and to otherize
yes.
them.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, you even hear, in apartheid Israel situation, them referring to Palestinians as animals.
Yeah,
It's amazing
exactly.
how it sort of goes to that all the time.
Right.
It's amazing. And yeah, and you hear all those different, the sheeple and this and that. And I often think that's so sad. It's like we just don't even see them. And then we're watching movies with, the Lion King or whatever, and they're all, these animals we're projecting our own traits onto. I mean, they're just sort of either, uh, things we're projecting our own traits onto, or things or that we're eating and wearing, and yet they're 99.99% of the planet's population, and the domesticated ones are certainly a huge part of that, the ones we've bred into existence
Hmm.
to eat, wear, and use. And yet they're, when you become vegan, it all starts to come into focus, that they are, you start to see them, I mean,
Yeah, you
really
really
see
do.
them.
Yeah,
And then you think, oh, holy, you're just going to think, oh my God, I've been sort of what I've been doing for the
yeah,
last. It's and that the scary thing I found, one of the scariest things I found was that I'd been under this illusion for 43 years of my life, basically, because I didn't become vegan until I was 43, and I've been vegan 14 years now. Is it 14? Anyway, I've been vegan. Yeah, I think it's 14. Uh, and I I um I just, it all sort of, when it came into focus, I was really, really shocked at how long I'd been in this kind of that I'd been duped in a way.
yeah,
Like I'd been a sort of completely duped in a way. Like I didn't even realize what I was doing. And that's kind of scary, that you can be indoctrinated that badly and that
hmm,
heavily and relentlessly that you can't even see what you're doing. You just go along with it.
yeah.
That's really, I found that so scary that I've been going along with that for 43 years of my life.
Hmm.
Um,
That's why I
yeah.
find when people say that it is their choice to eat animal products, I think it's not your choice. You have no idea the kind of
Mm,
forces, the corporate forces, the governmental forces, the societal forces that are behind your quote choice to eat
mm,
bacon or to eat cheese. You've been
mm,
indoctrinated since you were an infant into
mm,
believing that this is what you should eat. And
mm,
you're making
mm,
this quote choice along those lines. And it's not a choice at all. You're not
mm,
thinking critically.
mm,
You're not
mm,
examining the facts that are
mm,
available now everywhere on the internet, in books and movies and documentaries. And you're just going along with what you've been told all your life, just blindly
mm,
following the crowd.
mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and once you realize that, you can really see how certain other forms of discrimination, if they're really, really pushed, and you just get born into it, and everyone's like that, everyone has that otherization of that particular group, you can really see how that can just seem like breathing, like normal,
Hmm.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and we could probably talk a little bit about the documentary What the Health, and also the companion book that you've written, What the Health. And you mentioned that it's not just I mean the ethics of what we're feeding to children, and also the health, the different cancer industries and all of this. If you could just sort of explain how you got involved with What the Health, and what were some of the most startling kind of things that you found in
Oh,
that.
wow. Well, it's kind of a funny story how I got involved with Kip and Keegan, who are the filmmakers who made What the Health and Cowspiracy.
Mm,
Um, so after Chris and I saw Cowspiracy, he wrote a column on it for Truth Dig, where he has a weekly column. And he interviewed Kip and Keegan on the phone and, wrote it up. And when Keep and Keegan were looking for a writer to write the companion book to Cowspiracy, they were working with a publisher, and their publisher found this column that Chris had written and called him up and asked him if he wanted to write it. And he said, no, I write my own books. But he also, his issue is what he's been talking about for years. It's the corporate state, it's the military industrial complex, it's the prison industrial complex. And he sees the reasons for being vegan, but that's not really his issue. So he doesn't know that much about it. Whereas I, since seeing Cowspiracy, was like tearing through all this literature and information on the food industrial complex. And so he said to them, I don't really know that much about it, but you should really talk to my wife. So they did. And I ended up ghostwriting their book, The Sustainability Secret, which was based on Cowspiracy. But just like What the Health, the book, it goes into far more research, far more information and interviews. And then that just naturally led into my working with them for What the Health. So that's how it all came about. In terms of stuff that really struck me in doing research for the book, there were a ton of things. Like what I mentioned, the government and the corporate machinations behind getting people to eat animal products. There's they talk about this in the film as well. There's something called checkoff programs that are run by the federal US government, and they are marketing campaigns to advertise for specific food products. So you have a checkoff program for beef, you have a checkoff program for dairy. And how it works is that all the manufacturers of these specific foods are taxed a certain amount. I don't know what it is. Say it's like $1 for a gallon of milk. So all this money gets put into a fund, which is overseen by the USDA, the Department of Agriculture. And the USDA administers it and creates these marketing campaigns, which everyone in the United States has seen. It's like the incredible edible egg. It's milk. It does a body good. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Pork, the other white meat. And you see these campaigns everywhere. They're on the internet. They're on the subway. They're in print ads. They're on the television. And they get into people's subconscious. And they're just constantly in the forefront of what you see. So the reason that the USDA does this is that these animal agriculture industries contribute millions of dollars in lobbying money towards the government. So just towards Congress alone, the animal agriculture industries spend about $138 million a year. And so the government wants to keep these industries flush. So it's like this two-way street of making sure that the public continues to eat these foods, which scientific literature, mounds of scientific literature has shown are killing us and creating these chronic diseases that we suffer from. And so these two entities, the corporations and the government, are benefiting tremendously from it. And the ones who are paying for it with their lives, sometimes literally, is the American public. So I was astounded by these checkoff programs.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah, and I was also amazed to learn that we are all constantly growing tumors in our bodies. I had no idea and was sort of appalled to find that out. But if you look at autopsies of accidental death victims, I don't remember the exact statistics now, but if you look at a certain age group of, say, women from, I think it's like the age of 35 and up, many of them died, like say in car accidents, with undiagnosed breast cancer, except that it was so small, they didn't know they had it. And so we're constantly creating these tumors. And the question as to whether it remains a little, pinhead that is abolished by our body's immune system or grows into a grapefruit-sized lump that will kill you has so much to do with what you feed your body. And science has shown that plants are the most effective food in fighting cancer, because there are phytochemicals, there are antioxidants, there are all kinds of compounds in plants that will kill cancer cells. And the foods that will make cancer cells grow are animal products, because they're full of hormones. You take dairy, which is a growth fluid. It's meant to grow a baby cow into a great big cow. And these are growth hormones that are present in the most pristine, organic, local milk from the happiest of cows. You could have them in for, have them sleep inside your house. They still have these growth hormones. And so if you have a tiny little tumor in your uterus or in your prostate and you eat a lot of dairy, then those growth hormones will stream themselves through your tumor and could make them grow. Chicken, they feed all kinds of growth compounds to chickens to make them grow faster, to make them more profitable, so that they can be slaughtered when they're younger. And so they take up less feed, they take up less resources. And you're eating these growth elements, and they're coming into your body and making things grow that you probably don't want to grow. Other things like Kaiser Permanente, which is one of America's largest nonprofit health plans, began advocating in 2013 for its 17,000 doctors to aggressively tell their patients to start eating plant-based. This is an enormous health plan. And the reason they're doing that is because they want the people they cover to be healthy. They're an insurance company. So if the people they cover are healthy, if the people they cover are healthy, that's good for their business. And so when people say, oh, you're just biased, you want people to become vegan for the planet or for the animals, it's like, well, look at these facts. You have this massive insurance company urging its doctors to tell their patients to be vegan because they want to save money. It's not altruistic on their part. It's all money, it's all market-based, but they're following the science, and that's what the science says.
Yeah, there's big pharma that don't want people to be healthy.
No, because pharmaceuticals are in direct competition with a healthy diet. Because if you're healthy, you don't need their products.
Yes. Didn't a doctor try and get in some sort of nutrition nutrition training for doctors in the
Yes,
Congress
that was Dr. John McDougall. He tried to get a bill passed in California to mandate nutrition training for doctors in their continuing education credits. And I believe his bill started out, he proposed 12 hours every 4 years for practicing physicians, just to stay abreast of what is the science that's going on in nutrition research. And the most opposition he faced was from the standard medical groups in the state. And they kept saying it's a slippery slope. You can't mandate this kind of education. Doctors should take care of it themselves. And the bill kept getting cut. So it started out 12 hours. And then I think it went down to 7 hours. And the medical groups were still not happy. They were saying 7 hours, that's a lot of time to spend on one topic. And then it got cut down. It got cut down to 0 hours. And so the bill essentially said, you may go ahead and get nutritional training if you want. And that's when they passed the bill, when it was down to 0 hours.
Isn't that amazing? That really gives a good idea of who's funding, who's lobbying those people.
Right.
I mean, 0 hours, even like 7 or 12 hours is really nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, it's just nothing at all.
Yeah.
And when I go to the doctors here, I mean, I used to see little posters for dairy, to get calcium from dairy. And it's like so backward. I can't even take any nutritionalist seriously if they are in any way promoting animal products.
Well, sure. And the problem is that doctors aren't given any nutritional training, hardly any at all. And yet people have this impression that doctors are a good source of nutrition information and advice. And
Mm,
so they go to these doctors who don't know really, most of them, any more
mm,
than the rest of us. And
mm,
they've been fed the same indoctrination about how animal products are necessary for protein, for calcium, for
mm.
whatever. And they will tell this
Yes.
to their patients. And they think, oh, well, the doctor told me I've got to eat my cheese. I've got to eat my fish,
Mm,
to
mm,
keep my
mm.
heart healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like it was interesting. I heard that tumors are often ferrotoxic. They actually take in animal
The iron.
iron.
Yes. Oh, that
Yes.
was the other fascinating
Yes.
thing that I didn't
Mm,
know before I did this
mm,
book, that there
mm,
is a huge difference between animal sourced iron and plant sourced iron. So they're called
mm,
heme and non-heme,
mm,
deriving from hemoglobin. So animals bleed, so they
mm,
have heme iron. Plants
mm,
don't have blood, so they have non-heme iron.
mm,
And what's really fascinating is that the human body can regulate the amount of non-heme plant-based iron
mm,
that we eat. So say we have enough iron in our bodies and we don't need any more, but we're
mm,
eating plants that have iron in them. We can actually, it's like a thermostat. Our bodies can dial
mm,
down the absorption
mm,
if we don't need it, because you eat too much iron, it's a pro-oxidant and leads to all
mm.
kinds of DNA mutations and cancer. Um, but we
And
can't do that.
Alzheimer's.
Yes, all kinds of
Apparently, it's a
conditions.
sort of, yeah, they've linked that to, I think, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
but with animal-based iron, we can't do that. So we just keep absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. And
mm,
scientists can actually tell, looking at a cancerous tumor, how
mm,
much animal iron the patient had eaten. So I
mm.
think it's so fascinating that our bodies are able to do this with plant iron and yet not with animal iron,
Yes.
which, I'm convinced that our bodies are physiologically supposed to be herbivores. And there's
Yes.
all kinds of evidence to support that, from the structure
Yes.
of our jaws, the length
Mm,
of our gastrointestinal tracts, the
mm,
enzymes in our saliva,
mm,
and
mm,
this ability to dial up or down the plant iron absorption.
mm,
Um,
mm.
yeah, so
Yes,
that
the
was really
long
interesting to
antenna
me.
lines, and even like a recent report suggested that Neanderthals were actually mostly eating plant-based. There's always these kind of people saying, earlier humans were eating lots and lots of animal products. That's not the case at all.
It's not the
It,
case, and it's ridiculous
mm,
because
mm,
we weren't efficient enough as hunters to
no,
eat all that animal
mm,
product, and
mm,
they didn't have any refrigerators or freezers. So if you
yes,
killed an animal, you had to section it up, give it
mm, mm,
away, otherwise it would
mm,
rot. And that's the
mm,
other thing.
mm,
Human beings can't
mm,
eat rotting meat like carnivores
mm,
can.
mm, yes,
You have a
yes,
lion who can kill a antelope and
mm,
eat 100 pounds of meat and
mm,
then come
mm,
back the next day and eat the rest of the rotting carcass. We can't do
yes,
that. We
yes,
would
yes.
we would get ill.
Yes, yes.
That's another major
It's,
difference between herbivores and carnivores.
yeah, really. I found it interesting. I remember because I often get watch the how not. I often watch the nutritionfacts.org, the little videos
Mm,
that come out,
with Dr.
the
Michael
2 minute
Greger.
videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Grieger. And I found it interesting when I heard that diabetes actually, it's not really sugar and all that we're led
Yes.
to believe. It's actually sort of it's
It's
an
fat,
insulin sensitivity
particles of
based,
fat
yeah, build
caught
up
in
of
the
fat
muscle
inside
cells.
the muscle
Yeah.
cells.
Right, which
I mean,
makes,
and
yeah.
yeah, sorry, go on.
No.
Yes,
So the fat acts like it's Dr. Barnard, I think, who has this fabulous analogy. He talks about a key in a lock, and
mm,
your key works to open the door. But if
mm,
there's gum in the lock, then your key doesn't work anymore and you can't open the
mm,
door. So the
mm,
key is the insulin.
mm,
Um, and then you have the insulin receptor, which is the lock, and the
mm,
fat, the saturated fat from animal products gums up this lock so that your insulin key can't open it anymore. You can't open the muscle cell so that the sugar can go into the cell, so it remains in the bloodstream and builds up your blood sugar levels. And I don't know anyone who knows that. I mean, it's all
mm,
about sugar. It's all about, you don't eat too
yes,
much sugar if you're diabetic.
mm,
It's not about the sugar. It's
no,
about the fat, and specifically the animal fat, because that's the
yes,
kind that will gum up your lock.
yes. I often come across these sort of, they're science-backed studies, and through that nutritionfacts.org, and I'll sort of try and send that information to people on various social media pages that have, like those large organizations, and they just won't have a bar of it. It's like, and you sort of think, wow, that is something, the whole diabetes thing, that
I
is the
know.
whole thing about insulin resistance due to, animal fat buildup in the muscle cells. I mean, you'd think that would be something that might be a little bit important,
I
for
know. Well,
diabetes.
and you see this in
Mm.
the documentary and What the Health, where you go on the websites of, say, the American Diabetes Association or the American Heart Association, and they've got recipes on there for like bacon wrapped shrimp, you know?
Yeah,
It's like, what?
I
What?
know. I know. It's like, that's
Because it's
unbelievable.
really about maintaining. I think their true goal is not cure or prevention. It's
Mm,
about maintaining and managing your symptoms
mm,
with the disease, because in order to manage your symptoms, you need all kinds of pharmaceuticals, you need all kinds of
mm,
procedures, and these are big money making
mm.
operations and
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals, and they don't want that to stop.
No,
You know, if
that's right. And
someone
they're
was
all,
cured or prevented from having diabetes or heart disease, then the funding would stop.
yes, that's right. And they're all sort of a little bit in cahoots with one another, the pharmaceuticals and all of that. They don't really want people to get healthy.
Yeah, and that's
They want
exactly
you to
what the
keep,
documentary and the
mm,
book are about. It's all about
yes,
this net that is being
yes,
woven that people are unaware of, that
mm, mm,
really actively is designed to keep people unhealthy, chronically ill, requiring their medications.
mm,
Um, there's this horrible joke in the pharmaceutical industry that there are two major disasters that can happen when you do a clinical trial. One is if you kill people. The
mm.
second disaster is if you cure them. Because in either case, whether they're dead or they're cured, they're not going to buy your drug anymore. And you
Mm,
don't want that to happen. You want
mm,
compliance, and that's industry lingo.
mm.
Compliance means when someone is on a drug for the rest of their lives. They want
Yes.
compliance.
Yes, yes, they're not interested in seeing, and also a lot of these industries, they're all, their wages are being paid, and they don't really want to see the, I mean, I'm generalizing here, but there's a lot of investment in it not coming to an end, because they can continue on, with their career. And I mean,
Right.
I have to laugh when I see, well, I think it's so sad when I see these egg containers wrapped in, sort of pink, the whole pink ribbon sort of
Oh
thing for
my
the
God,
breast
the
cancer.
yogurt containers with the pink
Yes.
ribbons.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
I know. And it's like, I mean, what wasn't it? I think it was eat one egg. It's like the equivalent of smoking 5 cigarettes or
Yeah.
something. It was something like
Yeah.
that. And I mean, it's, and to put anything pink around dairy products, when I remember reading this specialist who said there's no way she would ever touch dairy again, because for the whole breast cancer thing and feeding, it feeds the, and encourages the tumor. I think the growth hormone, isn't it?
Hmm.
I think,
Yeah.
and
IGF-1. Yep.
and so, imagine you've got all these pink wrapped dairy product and yogurt and all this sort of thing. And I go around the supermarket, and I just think it's a sort of an insanity in a way,
It really
seeing
is.
these.
And then to
Mm,
think,
mm,
the dairy industry is just, the dairy and the egg industries are both systems of female reproductive slavery.
mm.
And they slap these pink ribbons on, and and women feel like, oh, there's sort of this implication that they're female friendly. I don't know. It's like, and then you have
Yes.
these systems where these female animals are being exploited for their reproductive systems.
Mm,
It's
mm.
insane.
Yes. Something that I found, just going back to the Cowspiracy and the book the companion book you wrote with that, something that I found really, really frightening, was the one, I think it's 1 acre every second of Amazon rainforest is cleared to make way for cow grazing, and
Yeah.
also for soy production to feed cows in these large
Yep.
feedlots lots. And I just thought that is sort of it's really hard to get your head around.
Yeah.
1 acre every second of Amazon rainforest, and how anybody, knowing that fact, even just that one fact, because, the Cowspiracy, the amount of, this is the documentary, the amount of information in there is just astonishing, of
Hmm.
how how disastrous animal product consumption is to, to climate change and to all these other things. But the 1 acre every second of Amazon rainforest, anybody who has any sort of claims that they are for, to protect free roaming animals or wildlife, as some people like to
Yeah.
call them, there's millions of animals are killed and shot and poisoned and trapped every year to quote unquote protect livestock. And there's also all that, just what I said about the 1 acre every second of Amazon rainforest. Imagine all the animals in that forest that are being driven out or driven to
Well, all the
extinction.
species extinction, absolutely.
Yes,
And I think the
yes,
figure is something like 90% of Amazon rainforest destruction is due to
yes,
either clearing land for grazing or clearing land to grow feed crops.
yes,
And I think the problem is that people don't, it doesn't affect them directly, and they feel badly about the Amazon rainforest, but it's really not affecting their own lives, at least not yet. And so it's very easy for them to sort of think, oh, well, it's just a figure, an acre, whatever. It's a lot of land, I'm sure, but there's plenty of it.
yeah. Oh, yes, yes,
There's
yes.
plenty of it. There's plenty of oceans, despite the fact that scientists are telling us that if we keep fishing the way we do, we'll have fishless oceans by 2048. And yet people
Yes,
think it's unlimited. There's so many fish in the ocean. It doesn't matter, We'll
yes.
just keep fishing.
And they don't realize that for every pound of fish, there are like 4 pounds or something that are
Bykill,
yes,
bycatch.
the bycatch in quotes, that are just either thrown away or and these are all aquatic animals. The sharks, there's like, I think there was 70 million sharks killed, tortured and killed every year for because we eat aquatic animals.
Yeah,
I mean, and people sort of go, you'll see animal organizations going, oh, save the sharks, bans shark fin soup, but they don't tell people to go vegan. And if people
right,
went vegan, we wouldn't have 70 million sharks being tortured and killed every year. I mean, it's sort of,
right.
there's so much, can be attributed to, if we just became vegan. First non-human animals are, they're sentient beings and they have the right not to be used as things. And, we have our health and the children who we're sort of literally in a way poisoning,
Hmm.
by giving them animal products. And then they grow up, there'll be 1 in 3, I think, people will be diabetic in the United States
By
in,
2050.
by
Yeah,
2050, if we're still around then. And,
exactly.
there's and then there's the 51% of greenhouse gases from animal agriculture, and people can
Hmm.
quibble about the percentage, but it's, if you look at check out Eunice's the companion book to Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret. That's the film. I mean, I started talking about when I became vegan, I was aware of the environmental impact in 2006, 2005, and I used to talk about that to green groups at the time. I'd sort of, I'd say I'd focus on the non-human animals, but I'd say, look at the, how much environmental, the climate change impact of our, eating and consuming animal products. And people just didn't want to know. And it's the same with the large animal the
Yeah.
large green groups. It's
It's
inconvenient,
all the
to,
same. I think
mm,
it's all the same problem, which is that
yes,
they receive money from groups
mm,
that don't want this message to be
mm,
getting out, and they don't want to alienate their member base, many of whom are not willing to change their lifestyles. And
mm,
they're receiving money again from their member base. And if they were to promote a strictly vegan message, then they would lose all of these people. They'd be like, oh, you're going too hardcore, you're too extremist. Sorry, I'm going to take
mm,
my check back, send it to someone else who will tell me it's
yes.
okay to, whatever, be vegetarian,
Yes,
you
yes.
know,
Yeah, exactly. And it's the
and to
same with,
buy happy meat from a happy place.
Yes, yes. And I mean, and in that, and people will say, oh, well, I'm eating, sort of grass-fed, in quotes, cows
Exactly.
and stuff. That's much better. No, well, they still all end up in the same slaughterhouse and they still have their
They
children
do.
taken from them.
And
And
actually, grass-fed beef is less
yes,
sustainable than
exactly.
factory-farmed beef. Not that factory-farmed beef is a good thing.
Yes, yes,
But if you
exactly.
look at the amount of feed they require, the amount of
Mm,
water,
mm,
resources, the extra amount of time they need to get to
mm,
slaughter weight, it's an
mm.
enormous amount of resources.
Yes, yes. I mean, wasn't it 660 gallons of water it takes to make one sort of, is it a
One
hamburger?
hamburger, yeah,
Burger?
one
I mean,
hamburger.
660.
1,000 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of milk.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
and if you're living in California where there was a drought, I don't know how the
I
drought is
know.
now, but I mean, it's sort of and that water in that I remember in that conspiracy movie they interviewed the water saving board, I think
Hmm.
it was,
Yeah.
and
And they were like,
they
water your lawn less,
yes, yes,
take
they
fewer
agreed.
showers.
Yes, the blank looks that would come over their
Yeah,
faces when the Kip told them, mentioned about,
yeah.
and they say, and
Well,
the most
the
startling.
coverage of that drought in California was outrageous because they kept talking about the thirsty crops like almonds,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
nobody ever mentioned the the animal agriculture industry.
Mm,
And the governor, Jerry Brown, he had called for a state of emergency. And I think it was something like he wanted to reduce water usage by 25%. So he was asking all the residents and businesses of California to do this. But agriculture was exempt from,
oh yeah.
from
Mm,
this reduction. And that's the biggest source of water use. And
mm,
it's completely unnecessary.
mm. It's so, I don't know, it does my head in sometimes with the absolute the illogical sort of things that are going on
Hmm.
today, and I don't know if you ever find yourself sort of like wanting to, when you see these kind of things going on, or that people are saying turn off your showers, only have 4-minute showers or something, and all of this,
Right.
and I think, oh, it's really, really, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
very disturbing, very
Yeah.
disturbing. But I was sort of I urge people to go and see both those What the Health, the film, and get a hold of Eunice's book, What the Health, and also go and see Cowspiracy. I think actually What the Health is on Netflix
It's
at
on
the
Netflix, and
moment.
so is Cowspiracy.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right,
Hmm.
yeah. So both of those, and of course, and the most important, I always say to people, the most important reason to become vegan is, because non-human animals are sentient, and they have a right to live free from our exploitation, our torture, and our killing. And of course, but if you are vegan, you are saving, the environment is the home to non-human animals and human animals,
Yeah.
and we're driving ourselves basically to extinction, and we're going to
Right.
take everybody with us. And
Right. And
it may be too
I
late,
always say
but
that, there's this distinction between ethical veganism and environmental veganism.
mm,
And I really think that environmental veganism is ethical because you're
mm, mm,
talking about preserving life, the source of life itself. It's not about, preserving your favorite hiking trail or anything like that.
mm,
It's really about
mm,
life,
mm,
life itself, our planet. This
mm,
is
mm,
it.
mm,
And so that is an ethical stance.
mm,
And
mm.
I mean, honestly, I have to admit that the health aspect of becoming vegan to me has always been the least compelling because
Mhm.
it's self-interest based when you would get right down
Yes.
to it.
Mm,
Um, and I understand, people are concerned about their families, but when you take a moral stance,
mm,
whether it's for the animals or for the planet, then it becomes something that you really can't turn your back on.
mm,
If you're doing it for health, you're doing it because you want to lose 20 pounds or your skin to clear up, then it becomes easy to say, well, here's a little cheese sample. It's not going to hurt me. I'll just have that.
mm,
But
mm.
when you're doing it for an ethical commitment, it's a completely different thing.
Yeah, that's right. And until we really start caring about all sentient beings, I mean, justice isn't exclusive. Until we start caring about all sentient beings, what we're not really fully living. That's what I feel. Like we're
Yeah.
living on this planet with other non-human animals, and they're so incredible. They're such incredible beings, and and we've talked, you and I, about how when you become vegan, you become a lot more, sensitive to just even
Hmm.
the
The
smallest little beings. And I
smallest
say small
lives.
just
Yeah.
because they literally are small, but you become more sensitive to insects and
Yeah.
to little worms on the ground, and
I
it just
found it so
enriches your whole
moving
life.
because I saw that happen with my children.
Mm,
Um, they're very concerned about ants and spiders
mm,
and moths. And my uh, my 9-year-old tells me that, at school, his classmates, even the sweetest, kindest kids, will take great joy in stomping on ants on the sidewalk.
mm.
And I actually remember doing that when I was a kid. I don't know what it is, like the sheer power of life and death. I don't know what a perverse human thing it is, but
Yes.
his friends do that and he doesn't, because
Mm.
he sees that those ants are alive and he doesn't want to hurt them.
Yes, yes, and that's a wonderful thing. I mean, if
It's a
imagine if
completely
all
different way of
children,
looking at the world.
yes, imagine if all children were kind of brought up like that to sort of really, really respect life, other
Hmm.
lives, and it can't help but spill over in
Exactly.
regard
It
toward
ripples
humans.
outwards. Yeah,
Yes, and it
I
and it
agree.
really does. I think there are some vegans who are only interested in non-human animals, and I think that's very unfortunate. But there are more vegans who see the connection with other the connection between non-human animal oppression and human animal oppression, and how you can't have one without the other, and also that if we imagine if children sort of grew up in that
Well, the
with
whole
that
world would be different. Can you
yes,
imagine if a
it would be
generation of
different.
children were brought up like that and
Yes,
saw
yes,
life in that way as something
yes,
precious and not to be exploited or tortured or used? I mean,
yes,
it would literally transform the world. I
it
mean, the
would.
problem with the world now is that we have people who see the world in exactly the opposite way, as
Yes,
a resource to be exploited and mined and made money off of. And that's all it is. It's just a
yes,
medium for growing rich, and that's why
yes,
we are where we are now.
yes, exactly. It's sort of been the focus has become how can you be productive? How like in an economic sense.
Hmm.
I noticed in Australia over the last few decades how that's the focus now. How you can be productive. Well, that this world is a finite resource. We're basically heading to this unfettered capitalism. We're basically going to use it all up. Well, that's an
Exactly. And
attitude.
then throw it out, because
Yes,
that's what
and
we
we're
do.
going
We
with it.
use it up and then we throw it out. But
Yes.
right, this time it's like we'll be thrown out too.
Yes, yes. So it's like that it has to change, and even if it is too late and we're on the precipice of extinction. I mean, I would rather us be a halfway decent species that cares
I
about
agree.
other species and cares about one another, and we stop otherizing. I would much prefer that, even if it is too late,
Yeah,
which it looks like it possibly is,
right.
that we go out that way. I would
Hmm.
much prefer that, and I'm sure you would. And that starts with with children, and it's a tragedy that the children really, they kind of, when they see non-human animals, they just want to, most children just want
Love
to
them.
show love them, and if we just kept on going that way,
I
imagine how
know.
different
I
it would
know.
be.
Yeah.
Just having that love, because they recognize the sentience in those non-human animals.
Right.
That's what was so hard when I was watching Cowspiracy and I saw those children. They were patting the little pigs on that farm,
That's
and
right.
they said, don't you or something about um, we don't name them because
Hmm.
they're going. And he said, "Why is that?" Because they're going to become bacon. Well, what a sad thing for a child to sort of be in that situation. But she's there because we are creating demand for animal products. That
Yeah.
little girl is there on that farm, and she's getting attached to those little pigs, but she knows she can't really name them because they're going to be killed.
Hmm.
I mean, and it's so sad. And I think that
Yeah.
sweet little pig there, and all, every second of every day, little pigs just like that one are in those slaughterhouses, frightened out of their minds. They can smell the death and everything, and it's completely unnecessary.
Yeah. And there's a
And
strange mindset that we
mm,
talked about this before, but it's like if you carry that into your adult life, if you anthropomorphize, that was like a cardinal
yes,
scientific sin. You can't put
mm,
human qualities onto animals, then you're a little loose in the head.
yes, yes,
You're supposed to stop caring at a certain point and become hard-headed, and
yes, yes. They'll say
it's a
because
very
that's the way
strange
it
thing.
is. You
Yeah.
keep getting told that's the way it is and that's the way it should be. Well, people used to think that about, you know, in the days of where it was legal slavery. There's still slavery today, and it's a different kind of a. But when it was legal slavery, people used to be told, well, that's just the way it is.
Right.
That group are,
Right.
they're our property. And I
Right.
mean, and just because we're being told that doesn't mean that's how it is. Just
Exactly.
because we think it doesn't make it so. So
Yeah.
we have to try and get our heads around the fact that what we've been told, what we've been indoctrinated to think about other animals that share this planet with us, and the ones that we've enslaved and domesticated to eat, wear, and use, even though we don't need to. That this is something we've been indoctrinated to do, and we're going to have to try and get our head around the fact that thinking it doesn't make it so, saying that an animal is stupid or whatever it is, or simply because they're not like us, they have incredible abilities that we don't have, and that doesn't make us lesser either. It just makes us different, and that's
Hmm.
the problem. We're always into this. If difference means that another group is lesser. I mean, we have to get past that. It's 2017.
I
We're going
know.
to have to move past this otherization. Um, so yeah, it's I just sometimes think, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just nurture the qualities that children have, that they want to love, and they love it. And most children want to just love animals,
Yeah.
and they recognize the wonderfulness of them.
Right.
It'd be really great. But anyway,
It'll be a different world.
yeah, that would be, and that's why vegan education. I mean, you recognize that, trying to encourage people to go vegan. That's why it's so important that and that's why I try and spend as much time as I can talking about that, because you know we can see kind of what kind of world it could be, and also that how much violence there is, and if we claim to be against violence, and if we claim to be for justice, then the natural, like a first step, I really think, is to become vegan. So
Yeah.
I hope that anybody who's watching this will consider that. It's not difficult, and it will completely transform your life. It actually, I even found after a few years of being vegan that I was still this whole experience was sort of deepening, and transformative. I was seeing things in different ways that
Yeah.
even when I just became vegan, I didn't. And it just kind
Hmm.
of gets richer and richer as time goes by. And I often say to people, I'm so glad that I didn't die. I'm so glad I became vegan, and just didn't, like, if the thought of dying and never having become vegan would have been seemed tragedy to me.
Right.
That's what I think about it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, Eunice, we'll probably wrap it up shortly, but I was just wondering if you might be able to share. You did some education in the taught literature in the maximum security men's prison in Trenton, New Jersey, and I just
Hmm.
wonder if you might be able to share some of your thoughts about the prison industrial complex and all of that. Anything that you'd like to share about that?
I think it's the human counterpart to the animal agriculture industry, actually. It's
Mm,
modern day
mm,
slavery,
mm.
because
Yes.
they're locked up, they're exploited for their labor, um, and they're out of sight. People don't think about them. My students were, I taught poetry, and it was a very small group. It was 12 men, and it was self-selected. So the guys who wanted to take a poetry class signed up. But they were really the most open-hearted and generous individuals. And they were so grateful that someone would come and talk to them as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes.
they loved writing their poems and reading them out loud because they finally had a voice. They could express themselves and be heard, even if it was in this crummy little gray room with, 10 of us sitting around listening to them, but it was still a way for them to have a voice, and
Mm-hmm.
their voice is taken away from them in the
Yes.
prison.
Yeah.
Um, it's a world where the most arbitrary rules can be inflicted with impunity. Like if I, as a teacher, were to show up 5 minutes late, the guard could say, "You're 5 minutes late, class is canceled." And there's
Wow.
no rhyme or reason. There's no justification because they don't have to give any. They're in charge.
Mm-hmm.
They have the power, and that's it.
Right.
Um, but it was an incredible experience, and I really want to go back and do more teaching there. I was originally supposed to only teach, I think it was four weeks, and I ended up teaching 4 or 5 months
Right.
because my students kept asking for more,
Oh,
and
wow.
they were so hungry. I mean, I taught everything to them from Shakespeare sonnets to Tupac and
Mm.
everything in between, Emily Dickinson and Asha Bandale and Amiri Baraka, and they loved all of it. Mary Oliver, I read them the
Uh,
poem that she wrote about humpbacks, which is one of my
oh, yeah.
favorite poems.
Mm.
And the guys came back next week and said they'd been thinking about whales all week. And one of them saw a special on whales on the TV. And it was just a window, one of the very few windows that they have into the outside world.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a very, very moving experience. And those guys were in there, most of them, for basically life sentences. A lot of them were in for murder.
Uh,
Some of them were in for weapons possession. Some of them were in for kidnapping. So they weren't, they weren't low level crimes. So they
yes.
were looking ahead at their lives, potentially the rest of their lives behind bars. And I think what was so moving, one of the things that was so moving was that literature and poetry became one of the only ways that they could have any kind of freedom, because they couldn't
Mm.
have physical freedom, but they could maybe
Yes.
have mental and emotional freedom, to
Yes.
read a poem about humpback whales and to envision that, to read
Yes.
a sonnet by Shakespeare and, you know, be connected to language from hundreds of years ago
Yes.
became
Yes.
this new arena for them to explore because they had
Yes.
nothing else. And they
Yes.
truly wanted to learn. I mean, you see students, I mean, I live in Princeton, and you see these kids at Princeton who are there to build a career. They're there for the resume, and their next step is to get a high paying job, and the next step is to get a big house. These guys, they're just learning because they love it, because
Mm.
it opens their worlds up in a way that they can't do in any other way. And
Yes.
that sort of pure love of learning was
Mm.
so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's really great. Because they've actually sort of set up, apart from it being like the new slavery and the disproportionate amount of black people in prisons, but it's like the new slavery with all the production of
Yes,
goods
that's
for
right.
less than I don't know, less than $1 a day or something.
Yep. And sometimes they get paid nothing. Sometimes they're paid like 5 cents an hour, something obscene. And the prisons will slap fines on them for anything, you know.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
so
Yes.
they have these charges that accumulate, these bills basically, so that
Yeah.
if they do ever get out of prison, they come out, owing thousands of dollars to the prison
Yeah.
system.
Because don't they charge for like footwear and all that sort of stuff?
Yes,
There's
they
all
have
these
to
things
buy
that
their
they
own
charge for.
sneakers. They have to buy things from commissary, toothpaste, whatever it is, stamps, batteries.
Yeah.
And they're making, a pittance, less than a pittance. They might as well be making nothing.
And they also try and sort of keep, they also ensure a recidivism too with this keeping those people away from their family. They make it
Yeah.
harder and harder for them to connect
Right.
with their family.
Right.
And they purposefully do it so that it would just be this sort of continual turning door sort of thing, a revolving door.
Sure,
And
because if you have a
they
black man on the street, they feel like, well, we're not making any money off him, put him in prison, and that's $25,000 for us. You know,
yes,
again, it's a money
exactly.
making commodity. It's like the pigs and the chickens and the cows. Lock them up, use
Yes.
them. They generate revenue.
Yes, yes, it's illegal slavery now. It's
Hmm.
appalling. And I was reading something really outrageous just recently where the private prisons, they actually look at the elementary, scores of young children to decide what they, how many beds they're
Oh my
going to
God,
need in the
really?
future. I know, and I just thought, I was just like appalled. Yes, I just saw this recently. I forget where I saw it. Somebody shared it on social media, and I
Oh,
just thought,
Jesus.
I know, isn't that awful? I mean, what have we become?
Yeah,
Like what have we become to sort of like think that way?
right.
Uh, you know, I just and I don't know, and it's sort of like the unfettered capitalism of just where people now are just they're literally just resources or they're disposable,
Hmm.
disposable or resources, and it's becoming more and more like disposable or a way of trying to either by making people really really unhealthy by not giving them education or access to healthcare or whatever, so that they're constantly feeding money into this awful system or disparate or laws like Bill Clinton introduced that end up with mass incarceration and people's going through the system and profit making from the prison industry. It's sort of like it's all designed to just do over people. We're
Hmm.
doing over humans and we're doing over non-humans. It's just what have we? I just sort of I don't know. It's no wonder we are where we are, really. That's
Yeah,
that's what I look at it. You can't go on with that kind of thing. You can't go on with that kind of attitude about sentient beings and it not end up a disaster at the end, where this is where we are. We're on the precipice
yeah,
of our extinction, and also on the precipice of either climate change getting us or nuclear war. That's sort of where we are, where we
right.
are where the only thing that, say for example, the US can do now is actually create weapons to sell, is like one of the bigger industries, like to make weapons to sell.
Right.
You know what
That's
I
our
mean? I mean,
manufacturing industry now.
exactly, and that has those weapons have to be used, so let's find another war. And this is like
Right.
what US empire is doing, looking for more wars to use their weapons and sell their weapons. And I mean, it's just sad. It's a sad thing. But anyway, I didn't want to end up on a on a sad note like that.
Well,
But
here's a happy note.
okay.
I saw that in the last 3 years, the number of vegans in the U.S. has grown by 600%.
Oh, well, that is a happy. That is
Yes, I
happy.
mean it's still a very small amount, but
Yes,
it's
yes,
exponential growth.
that's
And
right.
if
Exponential growth.
those vegans can talk to other people and start to get the word out, I feel like information is a massive hurdle. People don't have
Absolutely.
information. I just saw something on social media that said, if you're not vegan, you either lack information or you lack a conscience. And
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of people lack a conscience, but also a lot of
Mm.
people lack information.
Yes, that's true.
So
Yeah,
getting the
that's true.
information out is vital.
Yes, that's true. And sometimes people, maybe it might take them 20 times to hear the same message, or even 100 times. And some people hear it and then that's it. It's
Right.
funny how some people react differently, and I don't sort of write people off when I sort of hear somebody they mightn't click the first time or even the 10th time, and I just sort of think, okay, the seeds are there, and then one day it pops up. Like something happened to me when I was in 1980. 84, this woman she was vegetarian, and she said, asked her, I said, and she gave me a very strange response, but it made sense to me. She said, I asked her, oh, why do you eat fish? Because I sort of thought, well, they're floating around, they're in the ocean, they're free. I had this silly idea that's okay, to kill them because they haven't been in a cage or whatever. And she said, and this is an odd response, but she said, because they're a mussel, in the ocean, because I think what she meant to say was because they're alive and they're, in the ocean, and she doesn't want to, consume them. Of course,
Hmm.
vegetarianism is not what I'm advocating at all, but I remember that very clearly when she said that. It really resonated with me, and I just remember that moment so clearly, and it never left me. And even though I've been on and off, I've been on and off vegetarian in my life, but I always remember that when she said that, and I think, all these little things actually help us eventually sometimes get to these moments where people say stuff. Eventually they resonate, and it all
Hmm.
kind of comes together, and then you say, okay, enough of this. I've got to, if I reject violence, if I reject one sort of animal exploitation, I should reject them all, because it's all violence, it's all
Right.
unjust. And so, yeah, everything kind of comes together at some point, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
when you watched Cowspiracy, and when you talked to that your yoga teacher, and it all kind of just eventually it all came together, and it's
Hmm.
like a veil is lifted
Well,
from
and the
one's
prison
eyes.
too, that was part of it. That was the
Mm,
cowspiracy, teaching in the prison, the ahimsa, looking at my kids, it was everything,
mm,
and it
mm,
became
mm,
very clear to me that I just could not continue to do this.
mm, mm. Anyway, it's been really lovely talking to you,
Well,
Eunice.
it's been
Is there
lovely
anything?
talking to you, Trish.
Is there anything else you would like to add to anything that
Oh gosh, I don't
we
think so. I think we
probably
covered a
could?
lot.
Yeah. Yes, we've been talking over an hour and a half. So almost an hour and a half. But anyway, it's been lovely chatting with you. And maybe if I don't know if you're doing another book in the future, but maybe we can have you back to talk about that, or if you're involved in something else like that, that would be great.
Well, I'll
Or
let you
even
know.
just, and that'd be great. Okay, well, thanks so much for this, Eunice, and I hope that people will join me again next week. I'm talking to, excuse me, I'm just going to go into my screen for a sec. Um, I'm talking to Peter Cohen next Friday at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, and Peter's going to be talking about his recent visit to Gaza, so that will be very interesting. And so I hope that you'll join us for that. So anyway, we'll just wrap it up here, Eunice. And thanks so much for watching, and thanks so much, Eunice, for
Thank you,
joining
Trish.
me.
Take
Okay,
care.
all right. Well, bye for now, everybody.
Bye.
Bye for now. Bye.